I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Hey guys, if you like what I'm doing, click the Amazon banner at the top of the homepage on FascinationStreetPod.com and do all of your shopping through Amazon. Once you click on it and it takes you to Amazon, you can bookmark it or add it to your favorites and you won't have to go to my site each time. It helps me keep the show going, and again, thanks for listening. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with Christie Bishop. Fans of the Adam Carolla Show will know Christie as the wife of Bald Bryan Bishop. But what you may or may not know is that Christie has spent almost 2 decades in the advertising industry. And she has her own podcast called Commercial Grade, in which she talks about the different elements that go into advertising, and she always has a guest who is generally an expert in some form or another in the advertising field. So it's a great podcast. It's super entertaining and very informative. You get to learn things like the kind of money that different companies spend on advertising. You get to learn who is that voice that you just heard on that commercial and it sounds familiar, but you can't name it. You get to hear things like that. So it's a great show. Go check it out. It's called Commercial Grade Podcast. It's available everywhere. And in this episode, besides talking about her career path in advertising, she also shares the story from her perspective of what it was like when her fiancé at the time, Bald Bryan, was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor and given 6 months to live. It is a wonderful, wonderful, touching, and moving story. Bryan was given 6 months to live. That was 10 years ago. He's alive and strong, and they have a beautiful baby, and they have been married for 10 years, and everything is looking good so far. But this is a great episode. It's very touching. It's very informative. And you're really, really going to enjoy this one. So enjoy, folks. This is my conversation with Christie Bishop.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Christie Bishop. How you doing today?
Just fine. How are you? Thank you for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure. I've heard so much about you. It's wonderful to finally get to speak with you.
Thank you. It'll be fun.
It will be fun. So, Christie, tell me about, sort of where you grew up and I guess kind of how you were raised or whatever.
How I was raised. Complicated question. I am originally from Los Angeles, California. Not that many people are originally from Los Angeles, so whenever we meet one another and we're in LA still, the conversation is like, you're a native? Oh my God, me too. That's amazing. But I grew up in LA, born and raised. My family still lives here. I'm like a 5th generation Californian or Los Angelino.
Wow.
Believe it or not, and was raised in a very traditional household. Both my parents have their own companies, had and have their own companies. An amazing work ethic, great, little brother. I have a little brother who's 5.5 years younger than I am, and just the typical family unit. Parents worked their asses off. We had breakfast together, we had dinner together, and they traveled and worked really hard, and we had a really fun childhood. We had a really fun family who did a lot of fun stuff, but also, the whole saying, you work hard, you play hard. That I definitely remember that from my childhood too. So are your parents still together? Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. They've been married about 42 years, I want to say.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, my brother and I have a really good set of, I would say, family values and just a good example of what a great marriage is and what you should be, which is awesome because my brother just got married last June to an absolutely spectacular woman. And, obviously I'm married to Bryan. A lot of people know Bald Bryan from the Adam Carolla Show, and he's an absolutely spectacular man. So we did well for ourselves using our parents as examples.
Well, that is super cool because I think his parents are still together too, right?
His parents actually separated a few years ago, but they're still really good friends after a lot of years. So the family is still intact, but they ended up going their separate ways.
Gotcha. Well, You said you're from LA and not too many people are. I think you're right. I think it's just you, Adam Carolla, and Clint Howard. I think that's it. That covers everybody.
That's it. I have at least one or two other friends, but maybe there's like 5 or 6 of us. It's not a lot. You move out. Like I went to college at USC, and not a good time for USC. I'll just say that. I'm a lot bit ashamed of them at the moment, but that notwithstanding, I moved out after going to college. I moved to Chicago and went to grad school at Northwestern, and then moved around the U.S. school and work, like grad school and work, from Chicago to Dallas, and Dallas to Scottsdale, and then eventually back to L.A., traveled a lot in between. So people from L.A. tend to leave, and then eventually we like make our way back. The weather's amazing. Like, you kind of have to come back to California once you've lived everywhere else.
Yeah, so you go to college and then you go out into the real world and you make enough money to be able to afford to move back to Los Angeles.
Yeah, or you move back and you live with your parents for a few months, and then you figure out what apartment you can afford with your new advertising job, which didn't pay a lot.
There you go.
Or that. Or that. My grandparents were still alive at the time, and I remember them calling me and saying, all right, like, you're one state over. You're in Arizona. Like, come on. Like, you're coming west. Keep coming west. Like, we're not going to live forever. So I inevitably made my way home.
That's funny. So you said you went to Northwestern?
I did, for grad school. Yeah. I did integrated marketing communications in the Medill School.
Is that in the Chicago area?
So that's in the Evanston area. They have 2 campuses. The medical school campus is down in Chicago proper, and the rest of the actual school, like the University of Northwestern University, is up in Evanston. It's a little town about 30 minutes north of Chicago.
How was that shock for you, having those winters, those Chicago winters or Evanston winters?
So luckily, the first winter was quote unquote mild, and I only lived there for 2 or 3 winters, I want to say. It was mild, so it really only got down into, like, I think the teens, or like high single digits. It was still a shock to the system because I didn't have a car. So I had to walk 5 or 10 blocks to the campus, and then probably like half a mile within the campus to get to school. So when, it's the wind chill, you're right off the lake. Not super pleasant, but luckily, like, my parents had gone out with me. We went to North Face, because if you're going to live in the Midwest, you have to buy the clothing for Midwest winters in the Midwest. You cannot live in California and buy a jacket and then move to Chicago and think your California jacket is going to cut it, because it's not. It's just not going to happen. Similar for the East Coast in winter. So they were a bit of a shock. The second winter was really gnarly. I remember someone joked with me, and they're like, whatever you do, don't wear mascara. And I was like, what? Why? And it's like, just trust me. Just don't do it. Don't walk outside in the dead of winter wearing mascara. I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, whatever. And I did. And I walked outside, and within 1.5 blocks, your eyes start watering because it's literally freezing. So your eyes start watering uncontrollably. You're wearing gloves. You're wearing, like, practically a ski mask. And I start batting my eyes with my glove, and my mascara then freezes together. So I'm essentially blind. And I have one eye open, and I'm desperately trying to find a building to go into to defrost and, like, clean myself up so I can walk the rest of the way to school. And this is at like 22 years old. Not my shining moment. But if anyone's moving to a cold weather city from a warm weather city, just do yourself a favor and don't wear mascara in the dead of winter outside.
That is hilarious. Did you look like a raccoon once you finally got to a mirror?
Yeah, a little bit, but it wasn't cold enough to, like, where it kind of melted and spread. It just froze together. So once I got into the building and was kind of batting myself with my glove, it looked a little bit more like a raccoon, but otherwise I just looked like I had, like, pink eye, like where your eyes just stuck together.
That is hilarious.
Wasn't my finest moment.
That is awesome. So for those who might not know, Christie has been in advertising for the better part of the last 2 decades. And I'm really curious, what took you in that direction? What made you choose advertising?
So I was one of those people in college where I came across, it actually happened in college at USC. I was part of the Annenberg School for Communications and Journalism and was a comms major, and had a marketing class, or like an intro to advertising 101. And there was a specific book that went through the different disciplines within advertising, for example, account management, strategic planning, creative production, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember reading the section on account planning, also called strategic planning. And the idea is basically for people who are very inquisitive and want to understand what makes other people tick, what resonates with them, like what types of messaging resonates with them, like what insights into their behavior and their personalities really like connect with other products and brands. And I've always been someone who's liked to ask a lot of questions, who's like to get to know the more like intricate details of someone's life rather than just like, hey, what do you do? Like, I want to know who that person is and what really like drives them and motivates them. So I realized, I'm like, oh my God, you can get paid to do this. So that was in college. And then as you're getting out of college, I had always been like very driven. I'd always like worked. I worked through high school after I was like 16 and was old enough to work. And then I worked through college. Once I got to the end of college, I was like, oh God, like what now? Like, what? Like, am I supposed to go get like a job? I don't really know what I want to do. And so I ended up looking into grad school, and I found 2 or 3 colleges, or well, I guess schools for grad school. And one of them was Northwestern, and they had the best IMC, also known as Integrated Marketing Communications programs in the country. And I was like, there's no way this is happening. Like, I had great grades, but I didn't have work experience like you need to traditionally get accepted to grad school. And I applied there and to Boulder and to somewhere like a safety school in Arizona. And I got into Northwestern on a 1-year deferment, which I like couldn't even believe. And then it was the summer right before 9/11. And like 2 months before 9/11, I actually got a note from them, or a letter, because back in the day it wasn't over email, it was in the mail. You still had to wait for things in the mail. They must have had someone drop out. Like, that's for sure what happened. And I got a letter saying that I was like for real accepted, not deferred. So I packed it all up within like a month, and was like the first flight out of LAX after 9/11. And that was like the craziest experience of my life, and moved everything I had to Chicago. And my mom came with me to help set me up. And I went to Northwestern, did IMC. It was an amazing experience. And then from there, just really fell in love with the discipline of advertising and everything that went along with it, and strategic planning in particular. So I ended up just following that route. And 18 years later, here I am.
Wow. How scared were you if you were on like the first flight out of LAX after 9/11? Like, what was going through your head?
So we went to LAX, and it was completely cordoned off. Keep in mind, it's like there's life before 9/11 and life after 9/11, just for everybody, but also for the travel industry. So before that, for people who are old enough to remember, you could go up to the gate to like meet someone who came off the plane. Like, you didn't have to wait in baggage claim. Like, anybody could go anywhere in the airport at any point in time, whether or not you were a traveler or a family member picking someone up. The entire airport was shut down, and they were having lines of cars go through like extraordinary detailed security stops with like, SWAT gear, riot gear, German Shepherds, the whole 9 yards. Then we got finally into the airport, and there was a bomb scare. So we were evacuated to a hotel close by. Then someone called in a bomb scare to the hotel. So we had to leave that hotel. I think we ended up actually just coming home. And then we finally made our way back to the airport like several hours later. You can imagine the nerves. Everyone's on edge, beyond on edge, because this is, I can't remember, like maybe 5 or 6 days after 9/11. And we finally got into the airport. And I remember walking to our gate. I think it was on United Airlines. You could literally hear a pin drop. And everyone, I hate to say that the whole racial profiling or any profiling, but every single person who was in that, and keep in mind, there were very few people because they were only travelers. Like, no one else was allowed in. Every single person that walked in close to a gate was eyed up and down, myself, my mom, everyone, meticulously to gauge whether or not this person could be a threat, and if someone needed to like take them down on the plane. It was the craziest, most tense atmosphere I feel like I've ever been in. And then when we got on the plane, it was dead silent, like dead silent. Again, everyone's looking at each other up and down, like, who do we got to take out to make sure this doesn't happen again? And then I remember we finally took off. Even the flight attendants were like super nervous too. And once we were airbound or in the air, it broke out in applause. And then there was a little bit of like a sigh of relief, like, okay, we're okay. Like after about half an hour, and I think then it felt a bit more normal. But that's a long answer to your question, but it was really, really intense.
Well, I figured that it might have been.
Yeah.
I only flew, I grew up kind of super poor, so I really only flew, I think, twice before 9/11. So, I don't have a whole lot of memories about pre-9/11 airports, just from what I've seen on, 80s rom-coms where the guy,
Yeah.
goes all the way to the gate to tell her not to leave or whatever.
Yeah.
Which seemed to be
well,
like
you could do that.
Yeah, you could do that. That seemed to be a big trope back in the day.
Yeah.
It doesn't, that part doesn't really hold up anymore.
No, if anybody's chasing someone through the airport, you're going to get tackled by police. There's no romantic comedies in the airports anymore. Not so much.
Definitely going to get tased.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so sad, but it's true.
What was your first job out of school? Was it in advertising, or did you have to go wait tables or something first?
Well, I waited tables during school. During grad school, it was impossible to work. It was such a full-time program. It was like an 18-hour-a-day program. It was the most intense thing. It was the most amazing and intense and difficult thing I feel like I've ever done. But so after that, I graduated in December of 2002. So it was just a 5-quarter program, just over 2 semesters long. But the advertising and marketing industry had still not recovered from 9/11. It just a mere year later. So I wanted to stay in Chicago, and I loved Chicago. So I ended up moving to downtown Chicago to see if I could find a job while I lived there, so I wouldn't be commuting from Evanston, which is quite a haul on the train. And I ended up having right before that, I was part of a residency program that placed through Northwestern at an agency in downtown Chicago called Element 79, where I basically helped do just kind of interns work, but I managed some projects for like Pepsi and Quaker Oats and Tropicana, and they were launching Propel at the time, which is the water brand of Gatorade. So I helped do some man on the streets research where I basically carried a super heavy cooler full of like Propel down to the summertime boardwalk off of Lake Michigan and like handed it out to people and had them try it. And we took like a camcorder, like literally this was before the days of the iPhone. We took a camcorder and would measure their response and like record it. And then we would put together videos for our clients to see like what people thought of it and what occasions would they use it. So it was like very early research. But once that was done and I graduated, I spent 6 months trying to find a job in Chicago, like straight up from December to June, and, was going into debt, was living off of student loans, I got turned down from a Starbucks for being overqualified. And I was like, hey, like, I love coffee. Like, I will make your coffee. Like, I will be really freaking good at it. But I got turned down from everything. And finally, all of us in our program were trying to help each other because we were all having a hard time finding jobs just in the market. And a friend of mine who was from Louisiana and went to school with me, he had a friend in Dallas who knew a recruiter, and there was a company in Dallas called Harwood Marketing Group, which is now defunct. It doesn't exist, but they flew me down there. They had a junior I think it was just an account planner position, and they took me to Chili's for an interview. I'd never been to Texas before in my life, and I remember meeting with 2 people. They were super nice. It was my birthday, and I flew back to Chicago, and I got a call like 2 days later that they wanted to hire me. So I literally packed it up and I moved to Texas because I needed a job, and that was the job. So it was really tough, but you never know where life is going to take you.
That's nuts. So what kind of things were you doing? Like, what kind of projects did you work on when you were with the Harwood group?
It was doing a lot of research for different brands. Like I remember Corona was one of the brands. Kimberly-Clark was one of the brands. I think there might have been a tobacco brand. Very like Texas brands, a very Midwest brand. Cargill was another one. And just doing research for them, like trend research, trying to figure out, looking at the research studies that they had, like what were some interesting product propositions, meaning like how do you position products in the market, and just doing like trend reports. I remember I created a lot of my own trend reports just for the teams within the agency to kind of help educate people on like what was going on in the different marketplaces and what people found interesting, like what they didn't find interesting. It was a good entry-level job. It was solid. It was a decent time in Dallas. It wasn't my favorite city. Coming from LA, people tend to be obsessed with the fact that you're from LA and like, do you know celebrities? And I always found that kind of odd. But, people were nice enough. And I was a little bit of an outcast when I moved there just because I was 23, I think at the time. 23. I was brunette, not blonde. I was not married at 23, nor did I have any intention of getting married. I was single and I was career oriented. So the people that I would meet there, and I think it's very different now. This was, again, keep in mind, like 15 years ago, were very much like, hey, Christy, we're going to go to Junior League. We'd love you to come with us. It's 2:00 on a Tuesday. And I was like, I'm at work. And they're like, oh, but does your husband work? I'm like, no, I'm not married. Oh, okay. And then that was kind of like the end of the conversation. So I just spent a lot of time at work just because it was harder to meet friends there. But that was pretty much my responsibility.
That sounds terrible. And by that, I mean your Texas accent is horrific.
Yeah, coming on to Noah. No, I'm just kidding. Those are my junior league ladies.
Yes, the junior league does sound like that. And I never even heard of the junior league until I was probably 37. And I was like, what the hell is this? It's a bunch of bored housewives who get together and pretend like they're going to help out some other people. Cool.
Yeah, it was not, it was definitely not for me. I was also like, I joined a sorority at USC and was in it for about a year. And I was like, this is not my world at all. Like I had a much easier time making friends outside of the world of sororities. I mean, I still had friends in them, but I always found like I connected more with people who had like, I don't know, a bit more of like a drive. Like, not to say people in sororities don't, because they certainly do, but it just wasn't really my cup of tea. But it's, you know, my husband was in a fraternity and some of our best friends are still his fraternity brothers, and different strokes for different folks.
Yes. Different folks that have strokes. Got you. So, so you're in Dallas and you're toiling away, working your little butt off. And then, so were you there when the company folded, or did they fold after you left, or because you left?
Yeah, no, definitely not because I left. No, I ended up moving to Arizona, I think after 2.5 years. When you work in advertising for a certain amount of years, I'd only been in it for like 3 years at that point in time, you can start to meet with recruiters who will help kind of place you or introduce you to different agencies. Like they kind of keep an eye or have like a pulse on the open positions in the market in different cities, kind of wherever you're looking to go. And so I ended up meeting a recruiter randomly who, I actually forget the gentleman's name. I don't even know if he's very old. I don't even know if he's still alive, to be honest with you. But he knew of a company called Moses and Shell in Arizona, and they were looking for someone to help kind of start an account planning department underneath this amazing woman named Kat Langman. And I flew out and I was like, sure. I mean, I'm open. Like, why not? I don't love Texas necessarily. And I actually knew a guy we kind of dated on and off a little bit who lived in Arizona and in Phoenix. And I was like, okay, well, like, why not? So I ended up flying out and meeting with them and totally hit it off. Got an offer to move to Phoenix. So I moved to Phoenix, actually moved to Scottsdale and worked in downtown Phoenix. And it was actually really fun. I loved living in Phoenix and I loved living in Scottsdale. I mean, the summers are brutal. Like, let's be real, but people are super nice, super outdoorsy, very fit, totally into like outdoor stuff. I worked right next to the basketball arena and the baseball arena, and we had season tickets. So we would go like to Suns games and to Diamondbacks games. And it was a really small boutique agency, which was cool because it felt like a family. And there are probably like 40 or 50 people there max. And we worked hard together. We played hard together. We were there like through thick and thin for each other. And it was really cool. I worked on probably 18 different accounts, from like tourism accounts to, I think I had a small automotive account and just some other small stuff, nothing major, but it was like I cut my teeth on some good brands with some good clients. That was fun. But then after that, I eventually ended up meeting a different recruiter who brought me back to LA. If you want to hear that story, for anyone who wants to like for real hear it, I interviewed my former boss, Mark Miller, on Commercial Grade, which is a podcast that I host. And we talked all about legacy brands because he just wrote a beautiful book on that called Legacy in the Making. But he told the story of what it was like to hire me when I came in after a few days of brutal interviews. And then he met me. So that's a funny story. But then that's how I came back to LA. And my family was very happy. And I met Brian while I was in Arizona, but we didn't actually end up starting to like meet and then date for real until we were both in LA, but we met again in Arizona. It's this like convoluted story, but it all led me back to him.
Oh, all roads lead to the bald one.
That's right. They sure do.
So when you met him, was he already bald?
Yes and no. When I met him, like for real, he was bald, which is way better because he looks way better without hair. But when we were in college, we literally lived across the street from each other. Our fraternity and sorority for like the year and a half. Actually, I guess it was 2 years that I was in it. They were kind of like almost like brother-sister sororities a little bit. So we had a lot of events together. I went to a few of his formals at different like hotels around like downtown LA. I remember very distinctly because I remember seeing pictures of him when we first started dating. Like he had pictures from formals and stuff of him at USC, and he had hair at the time. And I remember being like, oh my God, like I totally recognize you and all of your friends. Like I went to your parties. And I have a very distinct memory of him serving me. I don't know if anyone knows of Jungle Juice. It's the world's worst thing ever, but it's like the base is Everclear and it's purple and it's served out of a massive trash can. And I can't believe I even drank this when I was like 19. But he was a bartender at his fraternity. And I remember him giving me a drink out of a trash can. And it was nothing to do with anything. I went on my way, but I just remember seeing the picture and was like, hey, I recognize you. And there was a trash can involved. And that was the end of it.
That is awesome. That's really funny. So I want to talk a little bit more about your career, and then we're going to take a hard left turn. So
Sure.
When you were working in Scottsdale or Phoenix, what were you doing for that company? Was it strategic planning?
So it's been strategic planning the whole time. Strategic planning is my lobster. I've just been with that. It's been my specialty. It's what I'm really good at. I helped, again, this woman, Kat Lingman, kind of as her number two, like put together an account. You can call it account planning or you can call it strategic planning. At Moses and Show, we called it account planning. And I helped support her and we put together a little account planning department. It was just the two of us. I remember I created a newsletter that like you print it out. I worked really hard at it every month. And I had a different section for each one of our like 12 or 15 clients with a different trend for like trend reporting and insight reporting. Kind of trend watching is really big when you're a junior strategist, or mid-level strategist. So you want to keep your finger on the pulse. You want to educate other people on different ways to think about things, keep them up with what's going on. I don't love the word consumers, as I've mentioned in the past, like on the Carolla Show, but like people, like what are people into? What are people not into? What are some of the predictions for trends? What are some things that the brands can tap into from like a messaging perspective that people will like and feel connected to. So I did a lot of that stuff. And that was the first time I actually started getting in front of clients to give presentations. So Arizona Department of Tourism was one of our biggest clients at the time. And I remember going to their offices in downtown Phoenix and giving like like what I thought at the time were major presentations to like, 5-6 people. And that's a big deal when you're 24 years old or 25 years old. Now I look back on it and I was like, oh my God, that's so cute. But it was like where I started to really like cut my teeth from a real strategy perspective I was only there for a year. It was very quick. It was I remember Hurricane Katrina hit and I remember watching, I don't know why I remember these things, watching it on TV before I would go to work from my apartment in Scottsdale. And remember, I think it lasted like 7 or 8 days. Like it was forever. And then, it was where I kind of like really cut my teeth from a real strategic planning perspective and then was ready to move back to LA to kind of hit big time advertising. It's kind of like working in radio or TV. Like you work in these smaller markets to get yourself ready for a bigger market station. And I think my career trajectory did the exact same thing for me from an advertising perspective.
Sort of a place to get your reps and get your experience and your 10,000 hours and then move on to the big show.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I wouldn't have been ready. At all. And then when I met Mark Miller, who's still at Team One, he's the chief strategy officer. He also is the founder of the Legacy Lab, which is a part of Team One. It's a wonderful kind of internal department, or not even an association. It's just this interesting lab where they really do a lot of research into what legacy brands are, not just like old brands and how they've modernize themselves, but how new brands are trying to create like new modern legacies to connect for a really long time. But I remember working with him and I learned the most I've ever learned from any boss during that stretch of time from Mark. And had I not had those prior experiences, I wouldn't have been ready to be open to and kind of like understand the lessons that he was about to teach me that I've still taken forward in my career. So yeah, life takes you where you're meant to go and preps you. It's like there is a plan. You just have to be open to it.
Well, I like to equate sort of building block education like that. I like to equate it to math, sort of like in the way that you can't learn algebra until you learn multiplication and division. Like they're building blocks for a reason.
Yeah.
That are sort of to get you prepared for the next step. So I think that's awesome. And you're still on good terms with this Mark Miller fellow? Oh,
yeah. He's one of my like really close friends and still a mentor, and we talk to each other all the time. Yeah. And like I said, I interviewed him. I think it was episode number 7 or 8 on Commercial Grade, where we go into, it's like an hour and a half of us just going really nerdy into legacy brands, into our experiences together. And we've been friends for 13, 14 years now, I think 12 years. So we're still super close.
Oh, that's great.
My name is Phil Rossi. I'm the creator of the sci-fi horror experience Crescent, along with Eden, Harvey, and a whole lot of other scary stories. 50 hours of all new podcasts are ready for download on demand, including my new book, The Trance, a gothic cyberpunk detective story. And let me tell you, this book has got fangs. For more info and to get your hands on the free podcasts, visit patreon.com/Phil Rossi. Now turn out the lights and take a deep breath, because the story is about to begin.
So, I think that you in the past have worked on at least one Super Bowl ad. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that was actually with my last position. I was with a company called Spark 44 for just under 7 years, and we were a joint venture. Spark 44 is a joint venture with Jaguar Land Rover. Just to begin, it was Jaguar. And then we ended up doing this Super Bowl campaign for the Jaguar brand, which was meant to bring back or reintroduce the Jaguar brand to the U.S. market. And I went to the client side before that. I betrayed my advertising peeps and I went to the dark side. I went to the corporate side. From there, a former coworker as well was heading up the Spark 44 organization and called me and said, "Hey, we need a strategic planning director. Do you want to come head up the department? And we might not have a job in 6 months, but it's a startup and we're going to try to relaunch Jaguar, and like, what better opportunity, because it's an iconic brand." And I was like, "I'm in. Let's do it. Let's see how it goes." One of our first things we did, like 2 years in, after a few smaller campaigns, we really needed scale. We needed something that was really going to make a splash. And so we put together this whole brief around the launch of the Jaguar F-Type Coupe, which is a two-door sports car. For anyone who's kind of a car nut, it's a spiritual successor to the E-Type, which is, the Steve McQueen Jaguar that was super sexy and super popular in the 1960s. And it's this absolutely ferocious, beautiful, like high design, high performance two-door sports car with a hardtop. I did a ton of research, and it was between myself and my coworker in London. There were two strategic planning directors with the whole company at the time. And we put together a brief and briefed our Los Angeles and London creatives over GoToMeeting, and then had our own individual briefings, and found this really interesting insight about the idea that people who drive these super high performance cars, they don't want to do so like when there's a lot of traffic, obviously. So a lot of people actually do it in the middle of the night when they can and actually Brian and I live fairly close to a freeway overpass, and we can 100% attest to this because we hear these cars go blazing like just Jesus Christ in the middle of the night, and it wakes you up and you're like, what is happening out there? But these people, they really have these alter egos, and they just go balls to the wall in the middle of the night. And it's very kind of dark and like seductive and villainous and just kind of it's just sexy, like the way that they really kind of refer to their cars. So we ended up presenting this to our creative teams, and they came up with the idea that this car was essentially going to be a British villain. And it was really, really interesting that we launched the car like that, but we launched it in Super Bowl because it was literally launching it on the world's biggest stage. Jaguar had never been in Super Bowl ever before. And just the idea that we could tie this new badass car that's driven, at kind of the darker times of day with people with kind of these questionable intentions to a British villain was really cool. And we got Tom Hiddleston, who was still up and coming. He had just been Loki. That was kind of his breakout role. We had Sir Ben Kingsley. Everybody knows who he is. And we had Mark Strong as our three villains. And we created this whole extraordinary world around this vehicle. And we won every award for it in the book, which was incredible. And then the Jaguar Land Rover Corporation ended up giving us the Land Rover brand as well. So we were in charge of both brands. And I was with the company just until last October when I left, and it was an amazing 6.5 year run. But Super Bowl is something that everyone should work on if they get the chance. Take it and run, because it's an amazing experience where you have you have clients who know they have to take a risk and know they have to spend money, so they're just super terrified, but they're much more willing to trust the agency and the creative genius, or hopefully they have creative genius, because they know they're going to get something great out of it. In our case, it was spectacular.
How hard was it, or did you have to convince Jaguar to, you had said they'd never been in the Super Bowl. What kind of convincing did it take to say, hey, I think you should spend $5 million on a 30-second ad spot? Did you have to convince that, or was it already in the works that that's what they wanted to do?
No, we had to convince them from a U.S. perspective, because so Jaguar is based in the UK. They're in a small town about an hour and a half north of London, maybe an hour north of London, called the Midlands. And they don't have Super Bowl like the way that we do. The closest thing that they have to Super Bowl are Christmas ads. So their Christmas adverts are huge. Like everyone's waiting for like the next John Lewis ads, and they're just huge, and that's kind of their Super Bowl. But they didn't really understand the scale or the opportunity to get the Jaguar brand in front of, literally 50% of the US. I remember my coworker at the time who ran our LA office, he and I had to put together what was called a decision paper. And I still have it to this day, a decision paper. And it was essentially like 12 pages of these different charts. They put together a very compelling case for, if you expose your brand to X amount of people, this is what you can expect to happen. You can see there's something called the sales funnel, which is like awareness at the top. Like, are you aware of the brand? Then familiarity. Are you familiar with it? Like, do you know a little bit about it or a lot about it? Then interest. Like, are you interested in it? Then there's consideration. Like, would you consider this brand if it was on your radar? Like, would you consider it to buy? And then there's purchase. So that means, did you buy it? Jaguar had high awareness, but it had low familiarity. Like, no one knew what the brand stood for. So we had to put these exhibits together to say, if we do this right, the whole impact on the sales funnel will be X, Y, Z. Then you can start to see this type of return on investment. You can start to see these types of customers coming in if we hit the right audience. So we had to put a whole decision paper together and basically justify. And it wasn't just $5 million. It was, that's just the purchase of the media, because we ended up doing a 60-second spot. The production budget itself, we were looking at upwards of $15 million, which for a very small brand that was not experiencing a high volume of sales was a huge risk, but it ended up paying off beautifully. And this was in like 2014, 2015. So a few years ago, it required some serious convincing.
Yeah, I bet. That sounds crazy. I recently interviewed a former advertising fellow. He used to work for McCann. His name is Paul Capelli. Are you familiar with him at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, so the way I found him is actually he has a company called Villa Capelli Olive Oil that sponsors Vinny Tortorich's Fitness Confidential podcast, and so that's how I found him.
Yeah.
But the way that Paul made his money is, he worked for McCann back in the late 70s through the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And
the heyday, yeah.
Yeah, so he is responsible for the entire Max Headroom Coca-Cola ad campaign.
Oh, that's funny.
Also, I guess it was the very first GoDaddy Super Bowl commercial where I guess they're all the same, but the attractive girl and that pretends like her top comes off or whatever. But it was the year after the Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction. And so they were supposed to air that ad twice, but I guess the network pulled it for the second time because they were too scared. But that guy, he's a pretty cool guy. And the reason I bring him up is because he has a pretty fascinating story himself. And I feel like he might be a great guest for your show, Commercial Grade. Oh, yeah,
that's a great idea.
So just one more thing about commercials, and then we're going to move on to something a lot different. So the new Lexus spokesperson is, I guess, Minnie Driver.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first, 11 times I saw or heard, her speak during that commercial, I swear to God, I thought it was Serena Scott Thomas, Vinny's girlfriend.
Oh, right. Vinny's wife. Yeah. Yeah.
I so thought it was her. Like, I just called Vinny and I was like, dude, is this her? And he was like, shit, I wish that was her. Yeah, no, that's not her.
I wish the paycheck was there. Absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely. Now, I want to change gears and I want to talk about your husband's book. Your husband, Brian Bishop, Bald Bryan, to those who are huge fans, he wrote a book called Shrinkage a few years ago, and I read it in 2013. I think that's when he wrote it, but I read it in 2013, about 2 weeks after my mother passed away from leukemia.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And that book really, really, really helped me. It helped me sort of understand what was happening to her and kind of come to grips with what had just happened. And in that book, you, Christie Bishop, are an actual angel from heaven. Now, I don't know if he was just using creative license and you're just like a super mean person in real life and he was just being nice.
That's 100% true. Yes, I'm a real bitch.
I'm sure.
No, I'm joking.
But the things that you went through and the things, I'm getting all worked up. The things that you did for him and the things that you went through to help him were the stuff of legends, like literally like the stuff that, like Mother Teresa didn't do the cool shit like that you did.
Thank
So
you.
first of all, hats off. Well done. You are a wonderful person. And
Thank
so
you.
this is going to sound super stupid, but thank you. Not
That's
just for
not-
doing that.
That's not stupid at all. Not at all. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Not just for doing that for your husband and your best friend and your mate and, you're the father of your baby now. But because you sort of showed that there are those people out there. I mean, again, that sounds dumb, but you don't really see a whole lot of caring, especially now. Everybody just, throws the finger at everybody else and tells them to fuck off. But, you don't see the kind of compassion and caring that, you did. And I just thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That's so nice. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Absolutely. So I want you to just briefly, because I don't want to make myself cry, but just briefly, can you talk about what you were feeling when y'all got that diagnosis? Which, for those who don't know, her husband Brian was diagnosed with I believe it's a glioblastoma. Is that right?
Yeah, at the time it was a low-grade glioma. Yeah, it was basically an inoperable brain tumor located in the brainstem.
And he was given 6 months to live.
Yes, he was given 6 months to live. And we were engaged to be married in 3 months from that point in time.
So talk about your emotions when that diagnosis came through.
It's interesting because April 23rd will be 10 years since he was diagnosed, which is unbelievable. I can never forget that. It's not enough to say I will never forget that. It's imprinted in me. There is life, like I talked about with 9/11 before, and it sounds trite to compare it to that, but for us, there's life before this and there's life after this. His diagnosis was not as simple as just going to the doctor and getting diagnosed. He was actually misdiagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and we were like, okay, this isn't great, but it's manageable, and we're going to go to Vegas, and we're going to just take a few days, we're going to blow off some steam and come back and figure this out. But they had actually done another scan, a PET scan, which was like a full body scan, prior to us leaving for Vegas. And when we came back, the doctor called us and said, hey, I'd like you to come into my office. And this doctor was an elderly gentleman. I want to probably say in his 70s, maybe mid to late 70s. He was very old school. And this was in 2009. His assistant had a typewriter, the whole thing. And I remember he called us in. He was like, well, I just want to let you know it's not multiple sclerosis. And we're like, oh, shit. Okay. It's been 4 or 5 days. We've been operating on the assumption of that, done all of our research, and kind of were like prepared for that. He was like, it's actually a thing called a low-grade glioma. He never said the word brain tumor. He never said the word cancer. He never said anything. He said, I know you young kids, I wouldn't go home and look it up on the internet. And then he just totally changed gears and said, but anyway, what are your plans for this weekend? I'm going to be pruning my roses in my garden.
You're
and that was,
me.
I swear to God, and this is in the book, 100%. I believe it's in the book. I'm 99% sure it's in the book. And we were like, okay. So we went home to our apartment. He had moved in with me by that point in time because we were engaged and the whole thing, which ended up turning, it's just the whole thing in terms of like the path of life and where it takes you. Man, again, I'm a huge believer that there are no accidents. There are no accidents, no coincidences. Like shit is planned out before we get here, and you're just living it and doing the best you can, because our apartment ended up being 3 minutes away from the hospital that treated him. And it still treats him now. But anyway, so we went home and we looked it up on the internet, as he told us not to do, because we're not fucking morons and like we're smart, excuse my French. And low-grade glioma is a brain tumor. And the average life expectancy of someone with a low-grade glioma, low-grade meaning they never knew what grade it was. Like cancer has grades 1, 2, 3, 4. His is inoperable, so they could never biopsy it. Like to this day, they can't. So we actually don't know what kind of tumor it is. Like we don't know where it came from, when it started, whatever. We just know they can't get to it. But anyway, the life expectancy is between like 12 and 18 months. And that was, I remember sitting on our couch in our little like shitty apartment. And I remember going into a full on panic, like complete, holy shit, what the fuck? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It's like, this is like, what? And then realizing we cannot be with this old man doctor, who also was like, oh, by the way, I'm going to give you a referral to this other like place, to this other guy also within the hospital, which I don't want to name because we didn't have a great experience, but they are a good hospital. And you should give him a call like when you can. So we ended up calling them that day, like literally right then and there. And they're like, oh, we've got time in a few days. And I was like, I think that's when the like businesswoman in me kicked in. And again, it was 10 years ago. So I was 29. No, I wasn't even 30. Like Bryan had just turned 30. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is apparently what this is. Like, we're getting the fuck in your office, like right now. And they're like, can you be here in 15 minutes? I'm like, we're in the car. Yes. So we went there, and it's this place on Wilshire Boulevard across from Cabo Cantina, which Bryan and I had frequented many times with friends, getting, tacos and nachos and tons of beer and margaritas and da da da. And the reason I say that is because we went to this place across the street, and I remember walking up to the door, and on the door said like cancer. And that was the very first time I ever because I've never had an experience with cancer in my life, or hadn't. Like, thank God, I'm so blessed to not have had, and neither did Bryan, really, truly, until that point. And that was when I realized it was cancer. The things you remember are wild. And I remember sitting in that waiting room reading a Sports Illustrated about Ray Maluga at the time, and looking out the window to Cabo Cantina, which was below us across the street, across Wilshire Boulevard, and watching these people eat their tacos. Oh my God, it like makes me cry. Eat their tacos, eat their nachos, drink their margaritas, and wishing like I would have done anything to be over there instead. Like, I would have done anything. And I remember Bryan and I just sat there so quietly and just like, what, like, where are we? What the fuck is going on? And we got called back into this doctor's office. He's referred to as Dr. Doom in the book for good reason. We were sitting in this little room, and this doctor came in. He wasn't that much older than Bryan or I, probably late 30s. And he sat down on the little kind of wheelie chair, the little, like, the little round chair, and wheeled himself up so his knees, one knee touched Bryan's knee and one knee touched my knee. And he just said, I'm so sorry. And keep in mind, we like still didn't really know. Like, we knew the shit was not good from the internet, and we saw cancer on the door, but we really didn't know. Like, no one had ever shown us a scan. Like, we'd never seen the MRI. We never saw what it was. Like, we didn't have any idea what we were dealing with, other than like, this is not good. And he was like, I'm so sorry, in like really hushed tones. And then he hands me a pamphlet that says A Patient's Guide to Brain Cancer. And that was how we found out it was brain cancer. And he goes, I've taken the liberty of highlighting some sections for you. I think this is the best way for you to like take a minute and read up on it. It was literally the worst experience that anyone could possibly happen, from someone saying it was MS to don't look this up. Here's a doctor. We don't know. Just go talk to this person. Seeing cancer on a door, someone rolling their fucking knees up to you and handing you a pamphlet saying, it's A Patient's Guide to Brain Cancer, and I'm so sorry, without having any idea of anything at all. And then Bryan, he describes it in the book, saying this is when he really went into a cold sweat, like a cold sweat. And he was just like, and I will never forget, he looked at the doctor and he's like, it was like a movie. He's like, so what am I looking at? And he's like, I'd say, and his voice got real low, which to this day is like a huge, huge trigger for me. When someone gets all serious and their voice gets low, like I can't handle it. He's like, I'd say 6 to 12 months, I would get your affairs in order. And that was when I lost my mind. That was when I went into full-blown, first and last time in my life, God, I haven't thought about this in a long time, full-blown hyperventilation. They actually had to remove me, and he was already sitting down, so I don't think he fell down. But I remember him just sitting there staring, like just into nothing, just staring into the void. And they had to remove me from the room and take me to the back of the doctor's office because I was beyond calming down. They gave me a brown paper bag at the back of the nurse's station at the back. This is a fairly small office situation, at the back, because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't calm down. All I remember saying to the doctor was, we're getting married in 3 months. And he was like, I'm so sorry. And he got up and he walked out of the room. And then we had to just go back into our car. That was the moment that like everything changed. We had to tell our parents. We had to figure out what the fuck are we going to do. And so luckily my mom's best friend is a fairly prominent person over at Cedars-Sinai, thank God. And so she was able to get us some people that we had to call and talk to, because we were not going to work with this doctor. There's no way. And we got in with the doctor named Dr. Keith Black. And he is like literally, like Maria Menounos refers to him as the Black Jesus. And he is literally the most zen, amazing person who gives you hope, who talks to you like you are not a number, We are going to do everything we can for you and your specific situation, and we are going to take care of you. And while Bryan couldn't have surgery, he set him up with his doctor, who's Dr. Rudnick, and he's also in the book. And that's where the course of treatment started. That was over the course of the next week, which seemed like forever while you're still planning a wedding, all of this. And that doctor, Dr. Doom, who handed us that pamphlet, didn't call Bryan for a solid 7 days to follow up on treatment plans. And Bryan, I remember, I was so proud of him because he's not a fairly aggressive person, but I remember him, we were at my parents' house and the guy called and he was like, well, if I really have 6 months to live and you just wasted a week of my time, that's a fairly significant portion of my alive time left. So I already have another plan in place. Thank you very much, but we're not going to be going with you. That's how it all started, but it was the most, and to this day is the most horrific, emotional thing. To say there was a lot of crying is the understatement of the century. There's panic attacks, there was hyperventilating, there was hysteria, there was depression, there was disbelief, shock, all of it within 3 to 5 days.
So I'm so sorry to have brought that up, but
Why?
thank you, because I know it's emotional. Thank you so much for sharing that. Again, this sounds dumb, but that means a lot to me. I've only met Bryan once, but he holds a special place in my heart just because I've listened to him for so long.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I will say, will you pass a message on to him? Will you tell him that I said, fuck you, Bryan? Only because of when he announced that you were pregnant with Tessa, the way he did it. I was out for a run. Well, who am I kidding? I was out for a walk. And,
Yeah.
and I literally stopped walking and I just fell to my knees and I started crying as he was telling this story. And then I wanted to throttle him to death when he said you were pregnant. I was happy and I was excited, but
Yes.
I wanted to kill that man.
You and thousands of others. And when he told me, and by the way,
Hundreds of thousands.
hundreds of thousands of others. Yes, absolutely. And like, by the way, please, you do not have to apologize for asking that question. That's why he wrote a book. He and I are open books with this. And this is, for better, for worse, since I've started commercial grade, I've had the great fortune of wonderful people like yourself asking me to share my story in all sorts of capacities, which I find incredibly boring. I'm like, I don't understand why people want to hear my story, but I'm always happy to share it. We are open books. And our whole thing with that, and that's literally 0.01% of the story. Our whole thing is about literally sharing it and giving it back. Because no one talks about this stuff and people need to, because people suffer in silence. Even people who, I went to lunch with a friend today and had to talk about this because she lost her grandmother and her mother both from cancer and her father from suicide when she was younger, not now, but she now has 2 beautiful kids and she's married. But when people go through these traumatic experiences, people, even your best friends, they do not know how to approach you about it, talk to you about it, empathize with you about it. They can feel for you. They can't feel with you. And it's really awkward. And anyone in this situation needs to know that there are people out there that can help them, that have been through these things, and that they're not alone. Because going through this in the moment is one of the most lonely things that can possibly happen to you, but you're not alone. And there are people that you don't know that you can reach out to that are just like us. We get people every single day tweeting to us, sending emails to us. He gets stuff through his Carolla email all the time, like Bryan at AdamCarolla.com, where people ask for help or retweets, whatever. And we are more than happy to do it. So don't be sorry that you asked that question.
Thank you. I would highly encourage everybody listening to get that book, Shrinkage. Whether you know anybody who has dealt with anything like this before or not, it doesn't matter. It's a really, really good story. And in the event that you do end up in that situation, or you know somebody who is in that situation, as helpless as we all are in the face of something like that, it's sort of a guidebook of what you can do and what not to do, what the person needs and the family needs, and kind of what they don't.
Yeah.
So I think everybody should read that book. Again, it's called Shrinkage. It's available on Amazon. Go get it. Now, a couple of things about your story. One, that doctor, Dr. Doom, he seems like he would have been just right at home at a concentration camp for Jews.
Oh God.
it seems like he's the guy who's like, oh, step right this way to the showers. What's that? Oh no, I'll have a Cobb salad. Hold the tomatoes. Right. This way. Just walk this way. Like, he seems like the most detached doctor ever. And, I do not like that guy.
I think we try not to fault him I don't know if I would go that far to say it, but I understand the analogy, but he just wasn't trained for something like this. And he didn't have the experience that we needed. He didn't have the capacity, the education, the hope. He wasn't experienced in brain tumor. So when, this was a time where I remember around that time, Grey's Anatomy, Katherine Heigl's character, a year prior, 6 months prior, had been diagnosed with a brain tumor and died in 5 seconds. And this was something that people did not talk about. It was hugely taboo, and he fell into that trap. And so we've ended up finding the experts who, not only was it not taboo, it was their passion. It's their passion to help find these people, help heal them, or if nothing else, extend their life, give them quality of life, and give them hope. And that's all we needed. That was it. And I literally remember meeting with Dr. Rudnick for the very first time, and I looked him square in the eye because Bryan was in a world of shock, and I was too. But I tend to jump to I jump to it, I spring into action. I remember saying to Dr. Rudnick, I was like, "Do not give us a reason to be afraid of you, because we are in this with you, and we need you to work with us to give us hope and a plan. We are not here for you to just say well, you kind of fucked." And he never has to this day. He's literally a family member to us. He's extraordinary.
Very, very cool. I like that guy. Not so much the other one. And it's not even about his lack of education in that particular field. It's more about his bedside manner. And if he was an old man, then he should have had plenty of years to correct this terrible bedside manner. I am not a fan.
Well, the guy who gave us the pamphlet was 35. That was even worse. Dr. Doom was very young. The other old guy I don't think is really mentioned in the book. Then Dr. Doom was young, which is wild.
Oh, well, they can both get fucked. I don't like it. But that place that you went, that was across the street from that cantina that y'all used to go to all the time?
Mm-hmm.
After you left that building, after you recovered and you had your brown bag lunch of air,
yeah,
did you guys go across the street and drink all of the tequila?
No, we went to my parents' house because it was right about 5 o'clock. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. And we went to my parents' house because my dad comes home from work around 5 or 5:30. We went straight there. And I remember my mom was home at the time. For some reason, she was there. I'm not sure why she was there because she should have been at work. But she was there. We went there and I remember walking through the door and my mom was like, "Hi." And that was a moment it all changed for her because I saw my mom. Oh, it makes you cry. I saw my mom, and I'm an emotional daughter. My mom and I are very close, but there are times when daughters need their moms, and that was the time when I needed my mom. Oh my God, I've literally never told the story. I never even thought to tell the story. And I walked through the door and I saw her, and I just literally, I think I might have fallen to the floor. I also realized this is my mom here, and Bryan's parents are in San Francisco. And this is about Bryan. This isn't about me. But I just had that moment where I just needed my mom. And then she was like, "What is happening?" And we just sat down and we told her everything. And then my dad came home and he was like, "Hi." And he saw us and was like, "What?" And then we told him. And then we had to figure out how to tell Bryan's parents. They were up at Lake Tahoe, or Truckee, actually just next to Lake Tahoe, with their best friends having a celebratory weekend. We had a big debate. Do we call them now? Do we wait? We don't want to ruin their literally lives. And we ended up calling them. And let's just say the weekend didn't go great from there on. But yeah, I wish we had drank all the tequila, but we didn't. We sprang into action and we rallied our troops around us, and we needed a game plan, not tequila. There was plenty of time for tequila later on.
Turns out 10 years worth and going. And counting.
Yes. Anyone wants to send me some Casamigos Blanco, that's my go-to now these days. That's what gets me through the day. No, I'm kidding.
Girlfriend has expensive tastes.
When you drink once a week, absolutely. Get it done on a Saturday. That's right.
There you go. You said something earlier, and I want to address that. The whole point of my show is that I think everybody has a story, and I'm really, really fascinated to hear those stories. And you said that you are surprised that people want to hear you on your podcast, or people want to ask you these questions and about your life, and that to you it's boring. And I will tell you right now that anybody who has listened this far and is not just amazed and intrigued at the story that you told, they are dead inside. So Everybody
Thank you.
has a story, but they don't think that their story is interesting or fascinating because it's their story. And it's just like, oh, well, that was just a Tuesday. But everybody really does have a story. And that's really why I started this whole podcast. So
I love that.
Again,
It's
thank
so
you
true.
so much for sharing that.
Of course, yeah.
Now, I have kept you forever. So what I need you to do is I need you to tell everybody about Commercial Grade Podcast, where they can find it and what it's about.
To know how commercials get made, and now you're gonna know. Oh yes, you really gonna know everything there is to know on Commercial Grade. It's Commercial Grade.
Yeah, I actually started doing a segment on the Adam Carolla Show last July called Carolla's Commercial Commentary, and it evolved into Commercial Grade because it was really well received by the listeners, who were like the most loyal, amazing listeners ever. The Adam Carolla listeners are just the best. And so I got a lot of requests after like 6, 7, 8 months of doing that. Like, are you going to turn this into your own show? And I'd never, ever thought about it. Like, I'm an executive marketer. Like, that's what I do. But, you know, my husband was like, you should think about it. We know the people to get equipment. Like, we know, like, we can talk to our producers. We can see what we need to get and we can figure it all out. And I asked people on Twitter, because again, like, thank God for the Carolla fans. So what do you guys want to hear about? Like, I'm happy to talk, but if there was a podcast, would you A, listen to it? Because I don't want to talk into the void and it makes me nervous anyway. And B, like, what do you want to hear? And I got literally hundreds of responses. So I was like, okay, I think I struck a nerve. So I put together a content calendar. I asked Adam Carolla for his blessing to use the name Commercial Grade, and he said, by all means, enjoy. That's awesome. And so I created it 2.5 months ago. It's available on Apple, on iTunes, on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere you get your podcast, it's available. But it's the idea behind it is that it takes people behind the scenes of advertising. And I basically explain with guests how their favorite campaigns and commercials that they just barely can tolerate and or understand, why those are made, how they're made. And I've talked to everybody from the first female chief marketing officer of Mitsubishi about, like, how do you sell cars to women? I've talked to people about advertising research, like focus groups and all of those things behind the scenes. Brian was my first guest actually, and we went through all the Super Bowl ads. And actually 2 days ago, gosh, it's been a long week, I spoke with the president of Podcast One, because the first question I get asked is, can you actually make money hosting a podcast? So I interviewed him. His name is Kit Gray, and that comes out next Monday. So new episodes are out every Monday, and yeah, it's called Commercial Grade. And so far it's been great. People seem to really like it, and I'm having a really fun time doing it.
Well, I am having a really fun time listening to it. I'm in the middle of binging it, so it's great stuff. Everybody go check it out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, Christy, where can people find you?
Well, beyond Commercial Grade, again, iTunes, Google Play, whatever. They can also just go to ChristieBishop.com. I have links to all the podcasts for both Commercial Grade and the podcast, or the Adam Carolla segments. There's my experience. And also, like, if they want to see more personal stuff, if they want to see Brian, Tessa, all of that, I'm at Pardon My Crumbs on both Twitter and Instagram. So they can check me out there.
And where can they email you at Commercial Grade?
They can email me if you have ideas for topics or feedback. It's commercialgradepod, P-O-D, @gmail.com.
Fantastic. Before I let you go, Christy, again, thank you so much. But is there anything that we didn't talk about or I didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we covered the gamut. Thank you very much for I always find my, like, career stuff a little bit, like, dry, but you know, if it's helpful for people, or if they have any like questions about how to get into the industry or anything, just, like, feel free to send me a note. But thank you for the opportunity to chat through all of it. It's been really fun.
It was absolutely my pleasure, and really, go tell Brian to fuck off from me.
I'll do it right now. He's one room away from me. I'll do it right now.
All right, you do that. Thank you again, Christy. I really, really appreciate you taking the time, and I want you to have a great weekend with your husband, who's still here, and your baby, who's here because your husband is still here.
That's right.
So go enjoy your life that you have, because you guys didn't give up and you guys didn't quit, and hopefully Dr. Doom and his evil twin are dead. But go enjoy your life.
Thank you. You do the same. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Christy. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, this is Steve Owens from Fascination Street Podcast here with a very important message. I'm awesome. I bet you thought I was going to say something else, but nope. What's important here is that I am awesome. I started this show because I truly believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear those stories. In the short time I've been doing this show, I've interviewed actors, directors, writers, inventors, podcasters, musicians, pro athletes, Olympic athletes, actual war heroes, even a Bond girl and a luthier, whatever the hell that is, and of course, regular people. From people who wanted to be stars but never gave it a real try, to big company CEOs and people who got to meet their favorite president. I love getting to meet and speak with people who have a story to tell. I feel like everyone does, and it's my job to get them to tell it. You never know who my next guest will be. An Academy Award-winning actor, a platinum-selling musician, or your own mother-in-law. But one thing is for certain, you will be fascinated by their story. So come take a walk with me down Fascination Street. You can find Fascination Street Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, FascinationStreetPod.com. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.